Hey y'all, what's going on? It's your girl Rhino, and welcome back to Black Ass Our History Presents. Y'all late to the revolution. This is going to be part 5 of our resistance from the beginning, and we're going to be looking at images of the revolts. Disclaimer: the content, image, and language that you're about to experience may be offensive and may lead to triggers. Viewer discretion is advised. Black Ass Art History is committed and dedicated to educating its audiences on the diaspora of melanated people with the intent to provide an honest and holistic history of our narratives. We are committed to ensuring our history and stories are not filtered through white supremacy, indoctrination, dogma, and pseudo-social science. So again, we're going to look at the revolutions and images as well as the revolts. The art that you are about to see are by both artists of African and European descent. Some of these images that are referenced are unknown artists. However, their work is critical and impactful to capture the narratives of the work. So let's look at images of the maroon colonies. Although this image has been often torn between whether or not this is an image of them working on a plantation, this is an image of a maroon colony, what we do know is that one of the biggest misconceptions is that maroon colonies were not organized. However, maroon colonies had community centers, meeting areas, homes, gardens, and specific land designated for specific purposes. They also had their own organized government and established politics. For example, although the British had, and not just the British, although Europeans might have had certain rules and regulations in regards to the maroon colonies, we do know that they had their own roles and regulations as well as operating within them. Again, this is another example of a work. This is possibly a lithograph, which is just a print, where you see that the community is central. We see that they're in a central space. Everyone's gathering to talk. We have someone in the right-hand side bringing water or carrying a jug. We have in the forefront someone working on a mat. We have a mother holding a child and talking to others. Again, this is an example of the success of maroon colonies when we're collaborative together. So this is an example of an engraving, and this is by Abraham Rombach. It's from the Proceedings of the Governor and Assembly of Jamaica in regard to maroon Negroes. This was probably more than likely a pamphlet or a brochure discussing what was occurring within Jamaica. Rombach was also the engraver to the King of England, and these images would be sent back as well as circulated to Europe to educate what's happening in the colonies. More than often, the images were also to incite different emotions and also to promote why slavery or controlling of non-Europeans was necessary. In this image, it is the pacification with the maroon Negroes. This was drawn by Agostino Bruñas, and it's a copper plate. Again, it's another print. What is so interesting about this is that we're seeing what is considered the negotiations between the Europeans and Maroons, but let's pay attention to how they're rendered. So if you look at the Europeans, they're fully coat dressed. One is even sitting as if he's a dignitary. And then on the other side, you have the Maroons with their head wraps on. Only thing, maybe a loincloth with a satchel. And in the forefront, you have one of the Maroons kneeling as if he's surrendering their weapons, like the muskets, the swords, and the knives as well. Again, more than often, if it's done by a European artist during this time, you're going to see non-European, specifically Black people, crudely drawn and rendered, just again to reinforce them as secondary class citizens and inferior. So let's take a look at some of the images of the revolts. So this is actually an oil painting by Edouard Antoine Renard. He's a French artist, and this is a slave rebellion on the ship in 1833. So again, as I mentioned before, you see this crude rendering of it. You really don't see the details of the face. You really have to get up on the image to see like his nostrils and his lips and possibly a goatee. But his body is structured there because, again, they were concerned more with the bodies because their bodies represent the labor that they would be able to produce on the land. Again, he has on like some sort of loincloth made out of torn fabric. We do see on his right ankle the shackle that's been broken. And at his left foot, we also see an axe as he is holding maybe an oar or some kind of stick. If you look at the bottom left hand corner, you will also see another enslaved gentleman within that box. So you see his white eyes, and if you squint, you'll be able to make his nose and his lips out. Again, crude renderings to reinforce the inferiority of Blackness in European art. It comes a standard, and we won't see a change maybe until late 1800s up into the early 1900s. Also, about that painting, this was painted in 1833, which was 6 years prior to the Amistad Revolt or the Mutiny on the Amistad, which again is indicating that we have been resisting off the shores, at the ports, on the boats, and we just did not come over willingly as enslaved people. So this is an illustration from A History of the Amistad Captives by John Barber. This is from 1840. The Amistad occurred in 1833. Again, this is a European artist, and we're going to see how they sympathize with the white captain, Captain Farrer. We see his arm is reaching up, and he's almost clinging to his heart to heaven, as if asking God for mercy and for his soul and spirit, which of course is so ironic considering the harsh tragedies and violence that is perpetuated on these Black stolen Africans. And then we see, of course, the former enslaved, well, they were still enslaved, unfortunately. We see the Africans having their clubs ready to take him out. Now, on the left-hand side, you do see a figure that's fully dressed, almost like in a typical sailor outfit, who also looks of African descent. He could have been a watch out. He could have been the lookout, but he's actually scaling the shroud, which is that net that heads up to the mast. Again, we don't know exactly, but we do know that the enslaved Africans did take control of the Amistad ship for a little bit. Here's another ship revolt. It's not well known, but this is the Tyrol Revolt in 1805. This revolt was actually organized by two Muslim men, and this was initiated off the coast of Chile. They were on their way headed to Ecuador when the revolt went out. I'm not sure how many number of enslaved persons and the crew that were on there. We do know there was about 72 remaining enslaved people, and they unfortunately would be sold in a port in Argentina. So this is the revolt in Jamaica by Francois Anne David in 1880. Again, this is an engraving or a print. Some people say that the date 1759 is incorrect. Some people said it was later, like 1760, 1761, which would make sense because it would relate to Tacky's War. So they're not for certain exactly what revolt this is capturing. What we do know is that the reason that works on paper like drawings and lithographs and engravings, anything that can be printed, was created for mass reproduction. These images would go on postcards, they would be individual illustrations, they would go on books and pamphlets and brochures. Again, ease of circulation. Once again, to show Europe what's happening in the colonies, also to reinforce why slavery is necessary, because again, it's demonstrating this African person with the sword in the forefront, almost in this barbaric manner, while we're watching this white man being slaughtered. So this image is very popular, and this is the Le Pillage des Cap, Revolte de Saint-Domingue, and this was done in 1793. So basically, this is the pillage of Cap Francois and the revolt that's happening in Saint-Domingue. This was by an artist named Bouquet, and it's in watercolors. So we have this vast landscape of Cape Francis, which is now Cap Haitien. And Bouquet was actually a French artist living in Saint Domingue when this occurred. So what we do see is it's a lot going on. In the middle part, you do see Haitians on horses. You see them on foot. You see them going through, taking over the land, taking over what's left of the plantation. You also see Frenchmen fighting too. So there's a war or a battle going on. On the bottom left-hand corner, you do see figures that appear to be European, and they also look like they're in distraught because they don't know when this is going to end or what is going to occur after this. So this is an image by an unknown artist, and it's the Rebellion of Damara. This was a huge revolt in Guyana, which involved anywhere between 9,000 and 12,000 enslaved people. Although the rebellion lasted only 2 days, they were still able to destroy land, obtain ammunition, get muskets, steal animals, cannons, whatever, and more from the Europeans. Typical revolts did not last long, maybe a couple of days, at most a couple of weeks, maybe to a month. But because revolts were so frequent, it looked like they were continuous throughout the colonies. So this artist is Adolphe Duperley, and it's the destruction of the Roehampton estate in the Baptist War in 1833. Again, this is a print. So in the middle ground, which is where we see most of the action, we do see the plantation actually going up in flames. If you look towards your left, you see the soldiers leaving that have set it on fire. In the background, you see more soldiers and recently freed enslaved persons heading to the next plantation. And in the foreground, you have additional more Maroons that are gathering tools. They're sitting, they're resting. So again, these are well thought, well planned out revolts to attack strategically. And by attacking the plantation itself, you're destroying the crop, but you're also destroying the tools necessary to harvest crop or do whatever. So if there's no tools, no crop, there's nothing for the Haitians to do. This is the Morant Bay Rebellion in Jamaica. So this occurred actually in 1865. So it was the Jamaicans began a protest against the poverty and the conditions that Black people were experiencing. And this was led by Pastor Paul Bogle. And even due to the high tax poll, freedmen weren't able to vote and pay for that polling tax. And there were other discriminatory acts. So when they came to protest, they did arm themselves to protect themselves with stones and sticks. And then the voluntary militia of white British actually felt threatened and killed 7 of the Jamaicans. And soon an all-out battle would begin. And they even burnt down the courthouse to let them know that they were not playing. What's even more interesting is that we have photographs of Maroons. So we have 2 small photographs of Jamaican Maroon. On the left, we see 2 with Colonel Fife. And then on the right, we just have General Maroons. So to see the images from the Maroon colonies is also interesting as well, especially as photographs. Now, this is one of the most well-known images as it relates to revolt, specifically of the Haitian Revolution. This is the Haitian Revolution execution of French, and it's a engraving from an historical account of the Black Empire of Haiti by Marcus Rainford in 1805. Now, keep in mind, on January 1, 1804 is when the Haitians declared independence. Jacques Dessalines declared independence to Haiti. So as you see, the focal point is of a French officer being lynched. And then in that upper left-hand corner, you see another French officer being lynched, maybe an admiral. But if you look in the background and focus, you will see lynching posts throughout. Because keep in mind, remember, one of the rules that the Haitians said is that unless you were, I believe the Haitians said that, you had to leave and anyone else that remained would be murdered. And I think it was that non-Frenchmen could stay, non-Frenchmen, non-British, doctors and nurses, and then European women that would marry Haitian men were allowed to stay. Everybody else would be murdered. And ultimately what happened is the Haitians said whatever the French inflicted upon the Maroons and the Haitians, they would receive that treatment as well. So this is the frontispiece from the Légende du Cap or Les Régions de Toussaint Louverture, and basically it transfers to the burning of the Cape or the reign of Toussaint Louverture. This is, again, another image of the Cape burning. I believe it was Cape Francois, and then it became Cape Haitien, and this was created in 1802. This is an etching of what happened at the Cap. Again, you'll notice in the bottom left-hand corner, the colonists, you see them scared and fleeing for their lives. You see the young boy running away. You see the woman holding her child looking back in horror as you see the Maroons destroying the ports and plantation and everything. And you also see soldiers. I'm not sure if that is the Black volunteer soldiers or if that's the French themselves, but you do see the destruction that was caused, as well as you see in the background white bodies scattered along the land. Again, here's another example of the same incident, the Incendies du Cap Français. This is by Swayback Desfontaines, again in 1802. So immediately after the Haitian Revolution, you do see a lot of lithographs and prints of what happened a year right after they've gained independence. So again, you see plantations being burned. You see the French ships are off the port. You also see the Haitians gaining their freedom, and you also see, people being buried and trying to escape. It was just pure chaos in this particular fight. Now, jumping forward, we're going to look at an actual oil painting. So this wouldn't be circulated as much as the other prints that we saw. This is Hunted Slave by Richard Ansdell. He's a British artist in 1861. So what's so interesting that in 1861 is the same year that the Civil War commences. So again, we see enslaved persons running for freedom. You have the male and the female. You also look on the gentleman's hand. You see that he's broken the shackle and he has a machete in his hand. He's already slain one of the hounds and he must slain two. Keep in mind, hounds were used to track the scent to try and capture runaways as well. So we're going to fast forward some 100 years and look at two African American artists. Two artists of African descent. Let me correct myself. So this is Barrington Watson. He was born in Jamaica in 1931. Watson is a premier artist in the genre of social realism. Social realism basically is literally what is happening or what has happened. It is looking at everything from what's happened currently and even taking a refresh look on historical incident. And what makes it social realism is the structure and style and rendering of it. If it was historical, it would look more hyper realistic or close to it. Social realism allows for emotion and fluidity of the movement. So we do see the emotion and chaos. And remember, at the Morant Bay Rebellion, it started as a protest about the poverty and the conditions of Black folks. The volunteer militia shot and killed 7 of the people, and then they just revolted and rebelled. So you see bodies slain on the stairs, you see people trying to escape, and you just see a mass of chaos as well. Again, the vibrant colors show possibly what it was like, as well as the full fleeting emotions. So these last 3 images we're going to look at is by an American master, in my opinion. His name is Jacob Lawrence. He is a well-known African-American printmaker and painter who documented the stories and narratives of Black folk. He's also a very well-known artist as part of the Harlem Renaissance. Often his work appears in series, and this series is called The Life of Toussaint L'Ouverture. It was 15 individual works, and I just chose 3 of the panels. One other thing to note about Lawrence is that he created the Migration series at the age of 23. And this series is 60 small paintings that told the story of Black folks' great migration from the South to the North. Had it not been for that series, we would not have a good idea of all the cities that Black folks from the South migrated to. So this is just a silkscreen on paper. This is a strategy. So they are single titles. And so this is probably them getting to prepare for a rebellion or a revolt. In this one, we have Don Don. So we see the arrival of Toussaint on horseback as he's beginning to do the liberation. We see people having their hands up, giving, praise and thank you as they are starting to fight the French back to get the domain of Haiti. And lastly, we have the march. And this is when Toussaint and Dessalines and all the Haitians and the Maroon colonies have come together and rounded up troops so they can fight. Or this also may be an image of the volunteer all Black militia that was there too. So we're going to end this here. Thank you all so much for joining us for our first week of Black Ass Art History. And I hope you stay tuned next week for when we're going to look at resistance as it relates to in bondage and bravery, and resistance, even being enslaved. So we're going to see the courage of creativity. So thank you all so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Peace.